The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal flooring. Representatives from 200 civilized species gathered under the dome of stars, their voices echoing in a symphony of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood at the human podium, his simple gray suit looking plain compared to the elaborate robes and bioluminescent displays surrounding him. The cravant delegate, a massive creature resembling an armored beetle standing 4 meters tall, raised one of its 6 limbs. Its voice boomed through the translation matrix. The humans wished to present their military capabilities for evaluation. We have reviewed their submissions. It is underwhelming. Laughter rippled through the assembly. The sound varied by species, from the chirping of the zealot to the deep rumbling of the throne, but the meaning was universal. They found humanity amusing. Marcus kept his expression neutral. He had expected this. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years. They were the newcomers, the primitives who had barely mastered faster-than-light travel. Every other species in this room had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. Perhaps, Marcus said quietly, you would like to reconsider after a demonstration. The craven's mandibles clicked in what the translation software interpreted as contempt. We have seen your weapons, projectile firearms, chemical explosives, nuclear devices. Every species here developed similar tools in their infancy. You bring nothing new to the galaxy. A Zephyrian representative, floating in a containment sphere filled with methane gas, pulsed with colors that meant agreement. Your biological specifications are equally unremarkable. Deathworld origin, yes, but many species here evolved on high-gravity, dangerous planets. The Throne homeworld has predators that would crush your largest animals. The Vex evolved in oceans filled with creatures you could not imagine. You are not special. Marcus activated his holographic display. Images appeared above the podium, showing Earth's ecosystems. Forests, oceans, deserts, tundra. The council members watched with polite disinterest. Earth has a unique classification system for its fauna, Marcus explained. We categorize predators by their hunting strategies, their aggression levels, their territorial behavior. Today, I want to tell you about something we call an apex predator. We know what apex predators are, the cravant interrupted. The dominant hunter in an ecosystem. Every world has them. This is basic biology. Yes, Marcus agreed, but Earth has many apex predators. Our world is unusual in that regard. Multiple dominant species, each adapted to different environments, each capable of killing creatures many times their size. He showed images of lions, great white sharks, polar bears, tigers. The council watched, making notes. Impressive specimens, certainly, but nothing that would concern a spacefaring civilization with plasma weapons and energy shields. These are your champions? The Zephyrian pulsed with mocking colors. We have weapons that could eliminate all of these creatures from orbit before they took a single step. I am not showing you these animals to intimidate you with their physical prowess, Marcus said. He advanced the presentation. I am showing you these to establish context, because there is one category of Earth predators that evolved differently. They did not grow larger. They did not develop stronger jaws or sharper claws. Instead, they developed something far more dangerous. The image changed. A creature appeared on the display, small compared to the previous animals. It had dark fur, a stocky build, and measured less than 1 meter in length. It looked almost cute, like something that might be kept as a pet. This, Marcus said, is a Wolverine. The council chamber fell into confused murmuring. The creature looked harmless. Several delegates consulted their databases, scanning Earth's biological records. The cravant's mandibles twitched. This is your demonstration? A small mammal that weighs perhaps 15 kilograms? We are wasting the council's time. Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a friendly expression. The Wolverine weighs between 9 and 25 kilograms depending on the individual. It stands approximately 30 centimeters at the shoulder. By all physical metrics, it should be prey for the larger predators I showed you earlier. He let that statement hang in the air before continuing. Wolverines have been documented killing adult moose. That is an animal weighing over 500 kilograms with sharp hooves and antlers that can gore a bear. Wolverines have been observed driving adult brown bears, weighing 400 kilograms away from their own kills. They have fought off entire wolf packs. They raid trap lines, tearing through steel wire to steal catches. They have bitten through frozen meat that would break industrial cutting tools. The murmuring stopped. Delegates were now actively searching their databases, pulling up footage from Earth's nature documentaries. But the physical capabilities are not what makes the Wolverine remarkable. Marcus continued. It is the attitude. The complete and absolute refusal to submit. A Wolverine does not assess whether it can win a fight. It does not calculate odds. It does not flee from superior numbers or size. It simply attacks, always, without hesitation, without fear. On the holographic display, footage began playing. A Wolverine, small and dark against white snow, faced off against a grizzly bear 20 times its weight. The bear towered over it, snarling, displaying its massive claws. The Wolverine's response was immediate and shocking. It charged, not away, toward. The bear, confused by this suicidal aggression, backed away. The Wolverine pressed the attack, snarling and snapping, climbing onto the bear's back. The bear fled into the forest with the tiny predator pursuing. Another clip showed a Wolverine approaching a wolf pack feeding on a carcass. 7 wolves, each outweighing the Wolverine, each with jaws capable of crushing bone. The Wolverine did not slow down. It ran directly into the pack, scattering them, and claimed the kill for itself. The wolves, apex predators in their own right, watched from a distance and did not challenge it again. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Marcus looked around the assembly, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and other various perceptual organs of the delegates. Humanity evolved alongside creatures like this. We watched them. We learned from them. And we understood something that perhaps your species evolving on more reasonable worlds did not. He advanced to the final slide. It showed a simple statement in multiple languages. Size means nothing. Strength means nothing. Numbers mean nothing. The only thing that matters is the willingness to never stop fighting. The Cravant shifted uncomfortably. This is an interesting biological specimen, but surely you are not suggesting that humans possess this same irrational aggression. Marcus's smile widened. Irrational? No, the Wolverine is not irrational. It is perfectly rational. It understands something fundamental about survival. In nature, most conflicts are about testing resolve. The animal that is willing to pay the highest price, to endure the most pain, to continue fighting past the point of reason, that animal wins, not because it is stronger, but because its opponent decides the cost is too high. He deactivated the display and stepped away from the podium. We did not request this council meeting to boast about our weapons. We requested it because several member species have been testing our borders, probing our defenses, making threats. We wanted to clarify our position before anyone makes a fatal miscalculation. The chamber remained silent as Marcus walked toward the exit. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. Humanity learned from the Wolverine. We learned that survival is not about being the biggest or the strongest. It is about being the one who refuses to quit, the one who will pay any price, endure any hardship, fight past any pain. We are not the most advanced species in this galaxy. We are not the most numerous. We are not the most powerful. But we are the species that will never ever stop. The doors closed behind him, leaving 200 species in stunned silence, each suddenly reconsidering their assessment of the unremarkable humans from the unremarkable planet called Earth. 3 weeks after the council meeting, the border incident stopped. Not gradually, but immediately and completely. The Vex warships that had been conducting increasingly aggressive sensor sweeps of human mining operations in the Kepler sector simply turned around and left. The Cravant diplomatic channels, which had been sending barely veiled threats disguised as trade negotiations, went quiet. Even the Zephyrian privateers who had been harassing human cargo vessels found other targets. Captain Sarah Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, watching her tactical display with growing suspicion. 6 months of constant pressure and now nothing, just empty space where hostile contacts used to appear. It is too quiet, her first officer, a Centaurian exchange officer named Vex, observed. His species had been humanity's first alien contact, and the only ones who had treated humans as equals from the start. The Cravant do not simply abandon strategic positions. Something has changed. Sarah pulled up the intelligence briefing that had arrived that morning via quantum relay. It was marked classified eyes-only command level. She had read it 3 times already, not quite believing it. Apparently, she said slowly, Ambassador Chen's presentation made an impression. Vex tilted his head in the gesture his species used to indicate curiosity. The presentation about Earth fauna? I watched the public recording. It was educational, but hardly threatening. That is what I thought too. Sarah transferred the classified portion to his station. Read this. The briefing detailed intercepted communications from 17 different species. Military channels, diplomatic channels, even some civilian media broadcasts. All discussing the same thing. The Wolverine presentation had gone viral across the galactic network. Some species found it fascinating from a biological perspective. Others were studying it from a military psychology angle. But almost all of them had reached the same conclusion, one that intelligence analysts had not expected. They were scared, not of Wolverines specifically, but of what the Wolverine represented. Of a philosophy of warfare that did not calculate acceptable losses or strategic withdrawals. Of an enemy that would rather die fighting than accept defeat. This is irrational, Vex said, reading through the intercepts. The Crevent Military Command is recommending against any conflict with humanity specifically because humans might fight beyond logical parameters. That makes no tactical sense, Sarah laughed without humor. That is exactly the point. We do not make tactical sense to them. Their warfare has rules, conventions. When casualties reach certain thresholds, fleets withdraw. When resource expenditure exceeds projected gains, campaigns end. When defeat becomes statistically inevitable, surrenders occur. It is all very civilized and calculated, as warfare should be, Vex said. Anything else is barbarism. Maybe. Sarah leaned back in her command chair, thinking about her history courses at the academy. But human history is full of situations where the side that should have lost kept fighting anyway. And sometimes, just sometimes, they won. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to accept reality. She pulled up examples on her personal tablet. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad, the Winter War. Dozens of historical conflicts where smaller forces had fought far larger ones, often losing but always extracting a terrible price. And in some cases fighting so ferociously that the enemy decided the victory was not worth the cost. The galaxy has been at peace, relatively speaking, for 3,000 years, Sarah continued. Wars happen, but they are limited. Controlled. Both sides use AI to calculate probable outcomes and often negotiate settlements before firing a shot. Actual fighting is rare, and when it occurs, it follows predictable patterns. Which is good, Vex insisted. Peace is preferable to chaos, I agree. But that long peace has created a galaxy full of species who have forgotten what real, desperate, existential warfare looks like. They have forgotten that sometimes the weaker side does not surrender. Sometimes it burns everything down rather than submit. Vex was quiet for a moment, processing this. His species had been spacefaring for over 4,000 years. They had mastered physics, biology, and mathematics. They had colonized 24 star systems and established trade with hundreds of species, but they had not fought a war in recorded history. You are saying humanity remembers something we have forgotten, he finally said. I am saying humanity has never forgotten. Because on Earth, survival meant learning from the predators around us. And the most successful predators were not always the biggest or strongest. Sometimes they were the ones who simply refused to give up. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the communication station. Captain, we are receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. It is flagged urgent. Sarah accepted the transmission. Admiral Chen, Marcus's brother, appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but satisfied. All ships stand down from alert status. The Cravent Dominion has formally requested a non-aggression treaty. The Vex Collective has offered technology exchange agreements. We have received similar diplomatic overtures from 43 other species in the past 2 weeks. The Council is calling an emergency session to discuss Earth's integration into the primary security framework. Relief washed through the bridge crew. Months of tension, of wondering when the shooting would start, suddenly released. However, Admiral Chen continued, his expression growing serious. This development comes with complications. Several Council species are now requesting detailed information about Earth's military capabilities. They want to know about our training methods, our tactical doctrines, our psychological conditioning. Some are asking if we can teach their forces to think like Wolverines. Sarah exchanged glances with Vex. The first officer looked disturbed. There are also concerns, the Admiral said, from some of the more peaceful species. They are worried that we have introduced a dangerous element into galactic civilization, that we have reminded everyone that warfare does not have to be civilized. The Centaurian delegation has formally requested that Earth consider implementing mandatory psychological screening for military personnel to ensure we do not produce individuals with, quote, excessive combat persistence. They want us to screen out the Wolverines, Sarah muttered. Essentially, yes. They want guarantees that human forces will follow standard conflict resolution protocols, that we will accept calculated surrenders when appropriate, that we will not fight beyond reasonable parameters. Admiral Chen shook his head. Command is still formulating our response. In the meantime, maintain standard patrols and represent humanity well. Chen out. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in thoughtful silence. They are afraid of you, Vex said quietly. Not of your weapons or your ships. They are afraid of what you are willing to do, of how far you will go. Sarah considered this. It was true. Humanity's technology was still centuries behind the galactic standard in many areas. Human ships were slower, their weapons less efficient, their shields weaker. In a fair fight, any major galactic power could defeat Earth's entire fleet. But that was the problem, was it not? Humanity had no intention of fighting fair. She thought about military doctrine she had studied. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, scorched earth policies, mutually assured destruction. Humans had invented dozens of ways to make victory so costly that the enemy would rather negotiate than fight. And now the galaxy knew it. My species has a saying, Vex offered. It is better to be feared than loved, but it is dangerous to be feared without being understood. What do you mean? Right now, the galaxy fears humanity because they do not understand you. They do not know if you are bluffing or serious. They do not know if your willingness to fight beyond reason is strategic posturing or genuine psychology. This uncertainty protects you now, but it will not last. Eventually, someone will test you. And when they do, humanity will have to decide if you truly are like the Wolverine, or if it was just a clever presentation. Sarah looked out at the stars through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, 200 species were reassessing everything they thought they knew about warfare and survival. And at the center of it all was one small, stubborn species from a death world that had learned its lessons from the most relentless predators in its ecosystem. I hope they never find out, she said softly, because if they push us far enough to see what humanity is really capable of, everyone loses. Vex did not respond. He had read enough human history to know she was right. The galaxy had enjoyed 3,000 years of civilized, calculated warfare. Humanity's arrival had just reminded everyone that civilization was a choice, not an inevitability, and that choice could be revoked at any time. The test came 6 months later, not from the Cravant or the Vex, but from an unexpected source. The Salkeen were a mid-tier power, neither particularly strong nor weak, known primarily for their banking systems and trade networks. They operated 17 colony worlds and maintained a modest military fleet, mainly for anti-piracy operations. They were also desperate. Their primary colony world, Salkeen Prime, orbited a star that was entering an unexpected phase of instability. Solar flares were increasing in frequency and intensity. The Salkeen had perhaps 5 years before the radiation made the planet uninhabitable. 3 billion Salkeen needed to be relocated. The problem was location. The only viable colony world within their reach was in a contested zone, claimed by both the Salkeen and the Throne hegemony. The Throne were a major military power, with fleets that dwarfed Salkeen capabilities. They had allowed the territorial dispute to remain unresolved because the planet in question was strategically worthless to them, until now when the Salkeen formally requested permission to begin colony operations. The Throne response was immediate and harsh. They declared the planet exclusively Throne territory and deployed a battle group to enforce the claim. Any Salkeen ship approaching the system would be destroyed. The Galactic Council convened emergency sessions. Diplomats argued. Mediators proposed compromises. The Throne refused all of them. The planet was theirs by right of military strength. The Salkeen could find another world. There were no other worlds. Not within range, not within the 5-year deadline. 3 billion Salkeen were going to die, and the galaxy was going to let it happen because no one wanted to challenge the Throne military. It was a calculated decision. The cost of saving the Salkeen was higher than the benefit. Therefore, they would not be saved. That was when Ambassador Marcus Chen stood up during a council. session and made an announcement that shocked everyone present. Earth will guarantee Salkine access to the disputed world. The council chamber erupted. The throne delegate, a massive creature covered in bony plates, slammed its limbs against the floor, creating seismic echoes through the structure. The humans have no authority to make such guarantees. This is not your territory. This is not your concern. Marcus remained calm, his hands clasped behind his back. The Galactic Charter, Article 12, states that any member species may provide mutual defense assistance to another member species upon request. The Salkine have requested Earth's assistance. We are providing it. You would go to war with the throne hegemony over a planet you have no claim to. For a species you barely know? The craven delegate sounded genuinely confused. This is not rational behavior. Rational? Marcus turned to face the cravent. 3 billion people are going to die unless someone acts. That is the only calculation that matters. Admiral Chen, attending the session via holographic link, added his voice to the discussion. As of 2 hours ago, the third human fleet is in transit to the disputed system. Estimated arrival, 4 days. We have transmitted a message to the throne, battle group informing them that any hostile action against Salkine ships will be considered an act of war against Earth. The throne delegates, plates rattled with anger. Your third fleet consists of what? 20 ships? The battle group we have in position includes 47 vessels, including 6 dreadnoughts. You would be obliterated. Probably, Admiral Chen agreed. But here's what happens after you obliterate us. The first and second fleets, another 60 ships, will join the battle. You will destroy those as well. Then our fourth and fifth fleets will arrive. We will keep sending fleets until either you withdraw or Earth has no more ships to send. This is madness. The Zephyrian pulsed with agitated colors. You would sacrifice your entire military for a planet you do not even want? Marcus smiled that same cold smile he had used during the Wolverine presentation. Did you think it was just a story? Did you think we were exaggerating? He activated a holographic display. It showed footage from Earth, specifically from human military training facilities, soldiers running obstacle courses until they collapsed from exhaustion, then getting up and running them again. Pilots flying combat simulations for 20 hours straight, pushing past fatigue and pain. Marines engaged in live fire exercises where the acceptable casualty rate made several alien observers physically ill. This is what we do to ourselves, Marcus said. In peace. In training. When nothing is at stake. Can you imagine what we will do when something actually matters? The footage changed. Historical records from Earth's wars. Soldiers charging machine gun positions they knew they could not survive. Pilots flying damaged aircraft into enemy ships because they had run out of ammunition. Entire units fighting to the last person, selling their lives as expensively as possible. We are not bluffing, Marcus continued. We are not posturing. This is simply what we are. You can accept it or you can test it. But understand that if you choose to test it, there is no turning back, because we learned from the Wolverine. Once we commit to a fight, we do not stop. Ever. The throne delegate was silent for a long moment. Finally it spoke, and for the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, there was something other than contempt in its voice. There was uncertainty. You would truly sacrifice everything. Your fleet, your soldiers, your future? For strangers? Yes, Marcus said simply. Because the alternative is accepting that might makes right. That the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. And if we accept that, then what was the point of all our evolution, all our civilization, all our progress? We might as well have stayed in the caves. He turned to address the entire council. I know most of you think humanity is barbaric, violent, irrational. You are not entirely wrong. We are all of those things, but we are also the species that will stand between the predator and the prey, even when it costs us everything, because that is what civilization actually means. Not technology or philosophy or art, but the simple willingness to protect the vulnerable even when it is not profitable to do so. The throne delegate stood and walked toward the exit. At the doorway it paused. We will withdraw our battle group from the disputed system. The Salkine may have their colony world, but understand this, humans. You have made an enemy today. The throne do not forget. The throne do not forgive, Marcus nodded. We understand. We do not forget either. The throne left. The council chamber remained silent. The Salkine delegate, who had been watching with increasing desperation, suddenly collapsed into its seat, overcome with relief. Why? It managed to ask. Why would you do this for us? Marcus looked at the Salkeen and his expression softened slightly. Because on our world we learned that survival is not an individual achievement. It is a collective responsibility. The Wolverine may fight alone, but humans survive by protecting each other. If we let 3 billion people die when we could save them, we would lose the one thing that makes us human. Over the next week, the situation resolved itself. The Throne withdrew their battle group as promised. The Salkeen began colony operations under the watchful protection of the Third Human Fleet. Other species, observing humanity's willingness to honor its commitments at any cost, began reconsidering their diplomatic relationships with Earth. The Centaurians offered military alliance treaties. The Vex proposed technology exchanges. Even the Cravent, grudgingly, acknowledged that humanity might be useful to have as friends rather than enemies. But there were also darker developments. Intelligence reports showed at least 12 species beginning to study human psychology and tactics. They were looking for weaknesses, for limits, for the point where humanity's resolve would break, because the Throne was right about one thing. Humanity had made enemies. Powerful enemies who would eventually test the limits of human determination. On the bridge of the UES determination, now on permanent station protecting the new Salkeen colony, Captain Sarah Rodriguez reviewed the latest reports. The Wolverine video had been viewed over 1 trillion times across the galactic network. It had spawned analysis videos, academic papers, military doctrine reviews, and even entertainment programs. Humanity was no longer the ignored newcomer. They were the subject of intense scrutiny, study, and in some cases fear. Was it worth it? Vex asked, standing beside her command chair. Starting a potential conflict with the Throne hegemony for a species that offers you no strategic advantage? Sarah looked out at the planet below, where Salkeen colonists were building new cities, starting new lives, raising families that would otherwise have died. Ask me again in 100 years. Ask those children down there when they are grandparents. Ask them if it was worth it. She turned back to her tactical display. Besides, this was never about strategy. This was about showing the galaxy who we are, not with words or demonstrations, but with actions. We said we would protect the Salkeen. We did it. Now everyone knows that when humanity makes a promise, we keep it, even when it costs us. Even when it costs you everything, Vex corrected. Especially then, Sarah agreed, because that is when it matters most. The galaxy had wanted to know if the Wolverine presentation was truth or theater. Now they had their answer. Humanity was not bluffing. They were not exaggerating. They were exactly what they appeared to be. A species that had learned survival from Earth's most relentless predators, and had taken those lessons to heart. The question now was what the galaxy would do with that knowledge. The answer came 2 years later in the form of the Roslith incursion. The Roslith were not part of the Galactic Council. They existed in the space beyond the established borders, a nomadic species that traveled between galaxies, harvesting resources and moving on. They had no interest in diplomacy or trade. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed anything that resisted. They appeared at the edge of Council space with a fleet that numbered in the thousands. Their ships were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could crack planets. They sent a single message to the Council: evacuate 12 star systems or be destroyed. They would begin harvesting operations in 30 days. The Council panicked. Their combined military forces could not hope to defeat a fleet of that size. The Roslith technology was superior in every measurable way. The only option was retreat and hope the Roslith would leave once they had what they wanted. Except one of those 12 star systems contained new Salkeen, the colony world humanity had helped establish. 3 billion Salkeen who had already lost one home, and humanity had made a promise. Absolutely not, Marcus Chen said when the Council vote came up for evacuation authorization. We do not abandon our allies. Your allies will be dead either way, the Cravent pointed out. At least evacuation saves their lives. Fighting the Roslith is suicide, even for humans. Marcus looked around the Council chamber, seeing the same resignation on every face. They had already accepted defeat, already calculated that the loss of 12 systems was preferable to the loss of everything. How many ships can the Council assemble? He asked. The military coordinator, a species that existed as a collective consciousness in cybernetic bodies, answered. We can gather approximately 800 vessels within the 30-day window. The Roslith have at least 3,000. The tactical AI gives us a 0.003% chance of victory. I did not ask about victory, Marcus said. I asked how many ships. He transmitted a document to every council member. It was Earth's battle plan. Not for victory, because victory was statistically impossible, but for making the Roslith regret ever coming to this galaxy. The plan was insane. It involved using human ships as targeting beacons, drawing Roslith fire while council forces attempted to damage their harvesting equipment. It relied on human crews making suicide runs to disable Roslith shields. It assumed 100% casualties for the human fleet and probable 50% casualties for everyone else. This is not a battle plan. The Zephyrian pulsed with horrified colors. This is a massacre plan. Yes, Marcus agreed. But it is a massacre that costs the Roslith dearly. They want 12 star systems. We make them bleed for every planet. We make them pay such a high price that they think twice before coming back. They will destroy you, the throne delegate said. Despite their earlier threats, there was something almost like respect in its voice. Your entire species could be eliminated. Possibly. But 3 billion Salkeen will not die without someone standing beside them. And maybe, just maybe, if we hurt the Roslith badly enough, they will decide the council space is more trouble than it is worth. Admiral Chen appeared on the display, broadcasting from the newly assembled human defense fleet. Every available Earth ship had been recalled, including merchant vessels that had been hastily retrofitted with weapons. In total, humanity was committing 97 ships to the battle. It represented nearly their entire spacefaring capability. All human vessels are volunteering for this operation, the Admiral reported. We have had to turn away more volunteers than we could fit on ships. Crew members are competing for positions. No one wants to be left behind. The council members looked at each other, searching for words. The Centaurian delegate finally spoke. This is madness. You are going to get yourselves killed over a promise. Over honor. These are abstract concepts. They are not worth dying for. Then we have nothing more to discuss, Marcus said, standing to leave. Earth will defend New Salkeen alone if necessary. Wait. The voice came from an unexpected source. The Cravent delegate rose to its full imposing height. The Cravent Dominion will provide 30 ships to support this operation. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Cravent were not known for sentimental gestures or hopeless causes. Why? The Centaurian demanded. This goes against every principle of logical decision-making. The Cravent's mandibles clicked slowly, as if considering how to explain something obvious. Because the humans are right. If we allow the Roslith to take what they want without resistance, we accept that we are prey. We accept that might makes right. The humans refuse to accept this. They may be primitive. They may be violent. But they understand something we have forgotten. Sometimes the only way to survive is to prove you are not worth hunting. One by one, other species began committing forces. The Vex sent 40 ships. The Throne, surprisingly, offered 25. The Centaurians, after much debate, contributed 15. Within hours, the coalition force had doubled in size. It still was not enough to win. The tactical AI recalculated their chances, 0.012%. Essentially unchanged, but humanity did not care about the odds. They had made a promise, and they were going to keep it even if it killed them. The Roslith fleet arrived exactly on schedule, massive ships blotting out the stars as they entered the target system. They scanned the defensive fleet that had assembled to meet them, and transmitted a message that the translation software struggled to interpret. The closest approximation was something like amusement, confusion. Admiral Chen broadcast the human response. You want these worlds? Come and take them. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries, not because of brilliant tactics or innovative strategies, but because of sheer, bloody-minded determination. The human ships charged first, not because they were brave, but because they were the targeting beacons, Roslith weapon systems designed to prioritize threats, locked onto the aggressively advancing human vessels. Energy beams that could vaporize a ship in seconds began firing. Human ships died, but not before launching their own weapons, not at the Roslith warships, but at their harvesters. The massive, vulnerable equipment needed to strip mine planets. The Council forces followed, using the distraction to strike at the harvesters. The Cravent dreadnoughts focused their heavy weapons on a single harvester, pouring firepower into it until it exploded. The Vex used their superior speed to dart between Roslith ships, targeting connection points and support structures. The humans kept charging. When their weapons ran out, they rammed. When their ships were disabled, crews set self-destruct sequences to detonate near enemy vessels. When escape pods launched, those pods were rigged with additional explosives. The Razlith had never encountered anything like it. In their thousands of years traveling between galaxies, they had met hundreds of species. All of them had either surrendered or been destroyed. None had ever fought like this. None had ever turned their own deaths into weapons. Captain Sarah Rodriguez was commanding one of the ramming vessels. Her ship, the Determination, had taken critical damage within the first hour of battle. Shields were gone. Weapon systems were offline. Hull breaches on 7 decks, but the engines still worked. All crew to escape pods, she ordered. You have 2 minutes. Vex, still at his station despite the evacuation order, looked at her. You are staying. Someone has to steer, she said calmly, plotting a collision course with a Razlith harvester. That someone is me. Then I stay too. Vex, that is not necessary. No, the Centaurian agreed. But you taught me something, Sarah. You taught me that sometimes necessary is not the point. Sometimes you do things simply because they are right. They stayed at their stations as the rest of the crew evacuated. The Determination accelerated toward the harvester. Engines pushed far beyond their safety limits. Razlith weapons fire converged on them, but the ship was already dying. A few more holes did not matter. It has been an honor serving with you, Vex said as they closed the final distance. Likewise, Sarah replied. Tell them we did not quit. The Determination struck the harvester at full speed. The explosion was visible from the other side of the star system, and across the battlefield similar stories played out. Human ships making final charges, council vessels following their example, pushing past acceptable loss thresholds. The Cravent losing ships they could not afford to lose but refusing to retreat. The Vex sacrificing their fastest vessels in daring attacks. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, the Razlith fleet was largely intact. They had lost maybe 200 ships out of 3,000, but they had lost something more important. They had lost 11 of their 12 harvesters. The equipment needed to strip mine planets, each one taking decades to construct. And they had lost the certainty that their victims would be victims. The Razlith are gone now. They will not return to council space. You are safe, but that safety came at a terrible cost. 40,000 human lives, thousands more from other species. Remember that cost when you consider whether civilization is worth defending? The council chamber was silent. Every delegate understood what had happened. Humanity had not saved the galaxy through superior weapons or brilliant tactics. They had saved it through sheer stubborn refusal to quit, by proving that some things were worth dying for, and in doing so they had changed the galaxy forever. The age of calculated warfare was over. Humanity had reminded everyone that sometimes the only way to win was to prove you could not be beaten, no matter the cost. The Wolverine philosophy had spread beyond humanity. Other species were studying it, trying to understand how to instill that level of determination in their own forces. But most were learning the hard truth that Sarah Rodriguez had known. You could not teach it. You either had it or you did not. Humanity had it, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they had learned it from the most relentless predators on Earth. And now the galaxy knew that when humans made a promise, they kept it. Even when it killed them. 10 years after the Razlith incursion, the galaxy looked very different. Humanity had rebuilt its fleet, but that was the least significant change. The real transformation was philosophical. The Galactic Military Academy, once located exclusively on the Cravent homeworld, now had branches on 17 planets, including Earth. Young officers from dozens of species came to study at the human campus, not to learn about technology or weapon systems, but to understand something far more elusive, the psychology of determination. Commander James Park taught the most popular course at the Academy. He was a survivor of the Razlith battle, having served as a junior officer on one of the few human ships that had made it out alive. His ship had been so damaged that they had considered ramming, but the battle ended before they got the chance. Today, he stood before a classroom of 40 students representing 12 different species. They watched him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Some had been sent by governments hoping to understand humanity better. Others had volunteered, drawn by stories of the battle they had heard growing up. What is the goal of warfare? James asked, his first question of the semester. Hands, tentacles, and various appendages rose. He pointed to a craven student. To achieve strategic objectives while minimizing casualties and resource expenditure, the student answered confidently. That is the goal of civilized warfare, James corrected. But what if your enemy does not agree to be civilized? What if they do not care about their casualties or resources? What if their only goal is to make you quit? The students looked at each other uncertainly. This was not covered in standard tactical training. James activated a display showing footage from Earth. Not the Wolverine video that everyone had seen, but something different. Archaeological records, ancient human battlefields, artifacts recovered from thousands of years of constant warfare. My species has been fighting itself for our entire history, James explained. We have developed hundreds of different fighting styles, strategies, philosophies. But there is one constant across every culture, every era, every conflict. The side that refuses to quit almost always wins, regardless of other factors. He showed images of ancient warriors, Spartans, samurai, Vikings, Mongols. Each culture had developed their own version of the same basic principle: death before dishonor. Victory or death, never surrender. This is not rational by galactic standards, James continued. Your warfare is based on mathematics. Calculate probable outcomes, minimize losses, accept defeat when it becomes statistically inevitable. This makes perfect sense for species that have enjoyed thousands of years of relative peace. He changed the display to show Earth's history. Thousands of years of near-constant warfare, empires rising and falling, civilizations destroying each other with increasing efficiency. We did not have that luxury. On Earth, defeat meant extinction. If you lost, your culture disappeared. Your people were absorbed or eliminated. Your history was erased. So we learned something that you forgot. We learned that sometimes mathematical certainty does not matter. Sometimes the only thing that matters is refusing to accept defeat. A Zephyrian student pulsed with questioning colors. But the Razlith were mathematically certain to defeat us. How does refusing to accept reality change reality? Because, James said, the Razlith had a choice. They could continue fighting and eventually destroy us, but at enormous cost. Or they could leave and find easier targets. We made the first option so expensive that the second option became preferable. That is the Wolverine principle. You cannot always win, but you can always make victory too expensive for your enemy. He pulled up casualty figures from the Razlith battle. The numbers were staggering. Then he showed economic analysis of what those losses meant to the Razlith. Each harvester took decades to build. Each ship represented enormous resources. The battle had been, by their standards, catastrophically expensive. They won the battle by every tactical measure, James explained. They destroyed our fleet. They suffered minimal losses to their warships. But they lost the war because they lost their ability to achieve their objective. They could not harvest the planets without their equipment. We had turned their victory into a defeat. Over the following weeks, James taught his students about asymmetric warfare, about fighting from positions of weakness, about turning disadvantages into advantages. He taught them how to make an enemy fear them not for their strength, but for their refusal to quit. But he also taught them the cost. My friend Sarah Rodriguez died in that battle, he told the class during one lecture. She was one of the best officers I have ever known. Smart, experienced, capable. She had her whole life ahead of her. She died steering a crippled ship into an enemy harvester because it was the only weapon she had left. The classroom was silent. James's voice had gone quiet, heavy with old grief. That is the price of the Wolverine principle. It works. It protects the vulnerable. It defeats enemies who should be unbeatable. But it requires people to pay with their lives. It requires a willingness to sacrifice everything. And once you commit to that path, there is no turning back. He looked around at the young faces watching him. Some of you are here because your governments want you to learn how to make your forces fight like humans. I need you to understand something. You cannot just teach this. You cannot just train it. It has to be part of your culture. Part of your identity, part of how you see the universe. A throne student, massive and armored, raised a limb. Then how did humanity develop it? Where does this mentality come from? James smiled sadly. From necessity. From thousands of years of having no choice. We developed it because the alternative was extinction. Every human culture that survived did so because they were willing to pay any price for survival. The cultures that were not willing to pay that price do not exist anymore. They were absorbed, eliminated, forgotten. He showed them more footage from Earth. Not warfare this time, but everyday life. Humans pushing themselves to extremes in sports and exploration in science, climbing mountains that killed them, exploring oceans that crushed them, attempting things that failed 99 times before succeeding once. This is not just how we fight, James explained. This is how we live. We are a species that does not accept limits. We try things that should be impossible. We attempt goals that others say cannot be achieved. And yes, we fail often. Väldigt ofta. But we keep trying until we succeed. The semester continued with practical exercises, simulated battles where the students were always outnumbered, always outgunned, always facing certain defeat. James taught them how to fight anyway, how to make the enemy pay for every meter of space, how to turn every defeat into a Pyrrhic victory for the victor. Some students thrived. The Crevent, already fierce warriors, adapted quickly. The throne appreciated the straightforward brutality. Even some of the more peaceful species found ways to apply the principles. But others struggled. The Centaurians, used to thousands of years of peace, found it difficult to accept the necessary casualties. The Zephyrians, who thought in terms of collective consciousness rather than individual sacrifice, could not grasp the concept of fighting to the death when survival was possible through surrender. "I do not think I can do this," one Centaurian student admitted after a particularly brutal simulation. "I understand the theory. I see how it works. But when the moment comes, I do not know if I can sacrifice myself or my crew for an abstract principle." James nodded. "That is honest. And it is okay. Not every species needs to fight like humans. Not every situation requires the Wolverine solution, but you need to understand it. Because humanity is now part of the galactic community, and we will respond to threats this way. When you work with human forces, when you plan joint operations, when you make strategic decisions, you need to know that we will fight past the point where you would surrender." He pulled up recent diplomatic reports. Since the Roslith incursion, galactic warfare had changed dramatically. Aggressive species had become more cautious, knowing that the galaxy now included forces that would fight to mutual destruction, rather than accept defeat. Territorial disputes were being settled through negotiation rather than force. Piracy had dropped by 70%. The Wolverine principle works even when you do not use it, James explained. Just the knowledge that someone is willing to fight that way changes everyone's calculations. The Roslith will not return not because we defeated them, but because we proved we would rather destroy ourselves than submit. That knowledge protects the entire galaxy now. But there were complications too. Some species had started developing their own versions of total commitment warfare. Military buildups were increasing as everyone prepared for conflicts that might not follow traditional rules. The galactic arms limitation treaties were being renegotiated to account for human-style tactics. "We changed the galaxy," James told his students on the last day of the semester. "For better and worse. We made it safer in some ways, more dangerous in others. We reminded everyone that civilization is a choice that must be defended, but we also reminded everyone of how terrible that defense can be." The students filed out, heading back to their homeworlds with new understanding and new concerns. They had learned the Wolverine principle. Whether they could apply it remained to be seen. James sat alone in the empty classroom, thinking about Sarah and the 40,000 others who had died proving a point. Their sacrifice had bought peace for the galaxy. But he wondered if that peace would last, or if they had simply started an arms race that would lead to even worse conflicts. 20 years after Ambassador Chen's original presentation, the galaxy faced its first internal crisis involving human forces. The Orlan Confederation, a mid-sized power controlling 30 systems, had been steadily expanding through aggressive trade practices and diplomatic pressure. They pushed smaller neighbors into unfavorable agreements, absorbed independent colonies through economic leverage, and generally operated at the edge of what the Galactic Council considered acceptable behavior. Their latest target was the Mirren Collective, a peaceful species of aquatic beings who controlled 3 water worlds rich in rare minerals. The Orlan wanted those minerals. They offered a trade agreement that was essentially a demand for surrender. Give us exclusive mining rights or face economic isolation and eventual collapse. The Mirren refused. They appealed to the Galactic Council for protection. The Council debated for weeks, calculating costs and benefits, analyzing legal frameworks. proposing compromises that gradually favored the Orlan because they were stronger and more influential. That was when the Mirren made a decision that changed everything. They requested Earth's protection under the mutual defense provisions that had been established after the Salkeen crisis. Ambassador Marcus Chen, now in his 60s but still representing Earth at the Council, accepted immediately. Earth will guarantee Mirren independence. Any Orlan aggression against Mirren territory will be considered an act of war against humanity. The Orlan delegate, a tall being covered in crystalline structures that refracted light in unsettling patterns, made a sound that the translation software interpreted as laughter. The humans again. Do you ever consider that perhaps you should stay out of matters that do not concern you? 3 billion Salkeen would disagree about whether protecting the weak concerns us. Marcus replied coldly. The Salkeen were facing extinction from natural causes. The Mirren are simply being offered a reasonable trade agreement. These situations are not comparable. You are threatening to economically destroy them if they do not submit to your terms. That is aggression. We oppose aggression. The Orlan delegate's crystals shifted colors, indicating calculation. You realize we have been studying human tactics for 2 decades? We have learned your Wolverine principle. We understand your willingness to fight past rational limits, but we have also identified your weakness. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh? You cannot sustain the Wolverine mentality indefinitely. The Razlith incursion cost you your entire fleet. You rebuilt, yes, but that required enormous resources. Resources you obtained through loans and trade agreements that you are still repaying. Your economy is stretched thin. Your military is strong but not large. You cannot fight another total war without bankrupting your civilization. The Orlan was not wrong. Earth had spent 20 years rebuilding, but the cost of maintaining a fleet large enough to deter aggression while also protecting allies had strained their resources. They were not weak, but they were not in a position to casually commit to another massive conflict. So you have identified our limitation, Marcus acknowledged. What do you propose? We propose you recognize that the Wolverine principle only works when you actually can afford to be the Wolverine. You have overextended yourselves protecting species that offer you nothing in return. The Mirren cannot help you. They have no military, no technology you need, no resources you want. Protecting them costs you everything and gains you nothing. The Orlan delegate stepped closer to Marcus, crystals pulsing with confidence. We are offering you an opportunity to be rational, to calculate costs and benefits like a civilized species. Stand aside. Let the Mirren accept our terms. In exchange, we offer Earth-favorable trade agreements, technology transfers, and a guarantee of non-aggression. It was a logical proposal, cold, calculated, and completely sensible from a strategic standpoint. The Orlan had done their homework. They were offering Earth a way out that did not require fighting or losing face. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Around the council chamber, delegates watched with intense interest. This was the test. Would humanity's famous determination hold when faced with economic reality? Would they sacrifice their own prosperity for abstract principles? There is something you misunderstood about the Wolverine, Marcus finally said. You studied human tactics. You analyzed our economics. You calculated our limitations, but you missed the fundamental point. He activated a holographic display, showing the original Wolverine footage from his presentation 20 years ago. The small creature facing down bears, wolves, and animals that should have killed it easily. The Wolverine does not fight because it calculates victory. It fights because fighting is what it is. Size does not matter. Strength does not matter. Numbers do not matter. Economics do not matter. The only thing that matters is refusing to submit. Marcus turned back to the Orlan. You are correct that another major war would devastate Earth's economy. You are correct that the Mirren offer us no strategic advantage. You are correct that accepting your offer would be the logical, rational, civilized decision. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire chamber. But we are not Wolverines because it is strategically advantageous. We are Wolverines because we refuse to be anything else. You want the Mirren systems? Come and take them. But understand that we will fight you every step of the way. We will make it so expensive, so painful, so destructive, that you will regret ever hearing the name humanity. And when you finally defeat us, because yes, you probably will, you will have won nothing but wreckage and debt. The Orlan delegate's crystals shifted through several colors before settling on one. The software struggled to translate. Something between anger and fear. You would destroy your own economy, your own future, for 3 water worlds that mean nothing to you? Yes, Marcus said simply. Because the alternative is accepting that might makes right. And the moment we accept that, we stop being human. We become just another predator in a galaxy of predators. We chose a different path. We chose to be the species that protects the weak, even when it costs us everything. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some species supported Earth's position. Others called it economic suicide. The Cravant surprisingly spoke in favor of the human stance. The Orlan make valid strategic points, the Cravant delegate said, but they misunderstand the nature of deterrence. If humanity backs down now, every species in this galaxy will know that economic pressure can break their resolve. The Wolverine principle only works if it is absolute. If humanity compromises, they become just another power to be calculated and manipulated. The debate raged for hours. The Orlan tried various approaches, offering increasingly generous terms to Earth, threatening economic sanctions, appealing to other species to pressure humanity into accepting reality. But Marcus remained unmoved. We made a promise to protect the Miran. We will keep that promise. Finally, the Orlan delegate played their final card. Very well. If you insist on this course, we will respond in kind. We will commit our full economic and military resources to this conflict. We will break you. And when your economy collapses, when your people are suffering, when your government is desperate, remember that you chose this. Remember that you could have had peace and prosperity, but you chose principle instead. The Orlan withdrew from the council chamber, and within days they began their economic assault. Trade agreements with Earth were canceled. Ships carrying human goods were turned away from Orlan ports. Species dependent on Orlan trade were pressured to stop dealing with humanity. The economic pressure was immense and immediate. Earth's stock markets crashed. Unemployment rose. Consumer prices spiked. The government had to implement emergency economic measures. And through it all, the military buildup continued, draining resources that the economy desperately needed elsewhere. On Earth, protests began. Not against the government's decision to protect the Miran, but protests demanding faster mobilization. People volunteered for military service in numbers that exceeded capacity. Families donated savings to war bonds. Children collected scrap metal for ship construction. The Orlan had misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. They thought economic pressure would break resolve. Instead, it strengthened it. The harder things got, the more determined humans became. It was the Wolverine principle at the species level. Commander James Park, now an admiral commanding the Earth Defense Fleet, watched the situation develop from his flagship. His students from the military academy were now serving officers scattered throughout the fleet. Some of them would die if this turned into a shooting war. He had taught them well, maybe too well. "Do you think we are making a mistake?" his second-in-command asked. She was a Cravant officer, one of the first non-humans to serve in the human fleet. "Probably," James admitted. "From a purely strategic standpoint, we should accept the Orlan offer. We would be richer, safer, and more secure. The logical choice is obvious. Then why do we not make it?" James looked at the display showing the Miran homeworlds. Peaceful aquatic cities built in harmony with their oceans. 3 billion beings who just wanted to live their lives without submitting to economic domination. Because Captain Rodriguez did not calculate odds before ramming that harvester. Because Ambassador Chen did not do a cost-benefit analysis before making his first promise to the Salkeen. Because sometimes the only way to remain human is to refuse to be logical. He turned to his second-in-command. "Our species spent thousands of years learning a simple truth. If you always take the safe path, if you always make the logical choice, if you always calculate and compromise, eventually you compromise everything that made you worth being. The Wolverine does not fight because it expects to win. It fights because not fighting would mean ceasing to be a Wolverine." The Cravant officer was silent for a moment, processing this very human philosophy. "Then we fight," she finally said. "Even if it destroys us." "Especially then," James agreed, "because that is when it matters most." The war that everyone expected never came. Instead, something unexpected happened. Other species began to notice. The Vex, remembering the Razlith battle, announced they would not honor Orlan trade restrictions against Earth. The Centaurians, despite their natural caution, offered humanitarian aid to offset Earth's economic losses. The Salkeen, who owed their existence to human intervention, diverted their entire merchant fleet to carrying human goods through routes the Orlan could not block. Within weeks, a counter-coalition formed. Not through formal treaties or military pacts, but through simple moral alignment. Species looked at the situation and decided which side they wanted to be on, the side that calculated and dominated, or the side that protected the weak regardless of cost. The Orlan found their economic warfare becoming less effective as alternative trade networks developed. They escalated, threatening military action if Earth did not withdraw protection from the Miran. Earth responded by moving their fleet into Miran space, making it clear that any attack on the Miran would have to go through human ships first. The Orlan fleet assembled at their border, a massive force of 300 warships. The human fleet facing them numbered only 75 vessels. The tactical AI gave Earth a 12% chance of victory. It was better than the odds against the Razlith, but not by much. Admiral James Park stood on his flagship bridge, watching the Orlan fleet on his displays. His officers were calm, professional, ready. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing the odds. They had all accepted that they might die today. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the Orlan fleet commander." "Put it through." The Orlan commander appeared on screen, crystalline features reflecting the lights of their bridge. "Admiral Park, I have studied your career. I know you are a survivor of the Razlith incursion. You know what real combat costs. You know what it means to watch friends die." "I do," James agreed. "Then you know that this is unnecessary. We are not the Razlith. We are not trying to exterminate anyone. We simply want access to resources that the Mirren are not even using efficiently. Why are you willing to die for that?" James considered the question carefully. It deserved an honest answer. "Because 23 years ago, a captain named Sarah Rodriguez taught me something. She showed me that sometimes the principles you die for are more important than the life you save by abandoning them. The Mirren are not just 3 water worlds. They are a test of who we are. If we abandon them because the cost is too high, then what are we? Just another power playing galactic chess. Just another species that only protects allies when it is convenient." He leaned forward, looking directly at the Orlan commander. "My species learned from the smallest, most stubborn predator on our planet. And the lesson was not about winning. It was about never quitting. You can defeat this fleet. You can take the Mirren worlds. You can even occupy Earth itself. But we will never stop fighting. Ever. And eventually that costs you more than the resources you wanted in the first place." The Orlan commander's crystals shifted colors rapidly. "This is insane. You are choosing civilizational suicide over a trade dispute." "No," James corrected. "We are choosing to remain who we are. There is a difference." The transmission ended. Both fleets held position, weapons armed, shields up, waiting for someone to make the first move. Hours passed. The tension built. Every sensor operator, every gunner, every pilot waited for the order that would start the shooting. It never came. Instead, a new transmission arrived. Not from the Orlan fleet, but from the Galactic Council. The emergency session had concluded. By a vote of 163 to 37, the Council had enacted a new provision to the Galactic Charter. Economic coercion would now be treated as a form of aggression. The Orlan's actions against the Mirren were officially condemned. Sanctions would be imposed on the Orlan Confederation if they did not withdraw their demands. The vote was not binding. The Council had no military force to enforce it, but it represented something significant. A majority of the galaxy had looked at the situation and decided that Earth's position was correct. That protecting the weak mattered more than economic efficiency. That some principles were worth defending even at great cost. The Orlan commander appeared on screen again, crystals now a dull gray color. "It seems the galaxy has gone mad. You have infected them with your Wolverine philosophy. Very well. The Orlan Confederation withdraws all claims on Mirren territory. We will comply with Council sanctions." The transmission ended. The Orlan fleet turned and departed. No shots fired. No ships destroyed. No casualties, but everything had changed. James sat in his command chair, suddenly exhausted. They had won without fighting. The Wolverine principle had worked again, not through violence, but through the threat of violence, through the absolute certainty that humanity would fight regardless of odds. "Stand down from battle stations," he ordered. "Send a message to the Mirren. Tell them they are safe." The bridge crew cheered. Some cried, The relief was overwhelming. They had prepared to die today. Instead, they would live. And more importantly, they had proved something about who humanity was and what they stood for. Back on Earth, the economic recovery began immediately. The trade restrictions lifted. The coalition that had formed to support Earth became formalized into mutual defense agreements. The Centaurians, inspired by human determination, began their own military reforms. The Cravent proposed joint training operations. The Vex offered technology sharing. Humanity had not just saved the Mirren. They had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of power and responsibility. Ambassador Marcus Chen attended the council session, where the new charter provisions were formally adopted. He was old now, nearing retirement, but he had lived to see his work come to fruition. The galaxy had learned the lesson Earth had been trying to teach for 23 years. "When I first showed you the Wolverine," Marcus said during his speech to the council, "you laughed. You thought it was primitive Earth biology, irrelevant to civilized space. But the Wolverine represents something universal, not just about combat or survival, but about identity, about choosing who you are and refusing to compromise that choice no matter the cost." He looked around at the assembled delegates, seeing respect now instead of mockery. Humanity did not ask to be the galaxy's defenders. We did not seek that role, but we accepted it because we learned from watching Predators that sometimes survival is not about being the strongest. It is about being the one who refuses to quit, the one who will fight to protect others even when there is no benefit in doing it. 23 years ago, you mocked Earth's predators. Today, you have adopted their principles into your laws. You have decided that might does not make right, that the strong should protect the weak, that some things are worth fighting for even when victory is not guaranteed. That is the Wolverine's true lesson, and I am proud that humanity could teach it to you. The council gave him a standing ovation, a gesture they had never given before. It was not just for Marcus, but for Sarah Rodriguez and the 40,000 others who had died against the Razlith, for the millions of humans who had endured economic hardship rather than abandon the Mirren, for every person who had chosen principle over profit, honor over safety, determination over calculation. Marcus retired shortly after, returning to Earth to write his memoirs. He lived another 15 years, long enough to see the galaxy enter an unprecedented era of cooperation and mutual protection. The Wolverine philosophy had spread beyond humanity. Other species were developing their own versions of absolute commitment to defending the vulnerable. Commander James Park, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, took over as Earth's primary military representative to the Council. He continued teaching at the Academy, training the next generation of officers who would defend not just Earth but the entire galaxy. The Mirren built a memorial on their primary world, a statue showing a human, a Cravent, a Vex, and a Centaurian standing together protecting a Mirren child. Beneath it, an inscription in every known language. They stood for us when it cost them everything. We will remember. 50 years after Marcus Chen's original presentation, the galaxy was fundamentally different. Wars still happened, but they were rarer. Aggression was quickly met with coalition resistance. The weak were protected not out of obligation, but because protection had become a core galactic value. And it all started with one simple presentation about a small, stubborn predator that refused to give up. The Wolverine had taught humanity. Humanity had taught the galaxy, and the galaxy was better for it. Earth's archives preserved the original footage of Marcus's first council presentation. It was required viewing for every new council member, every military officer, every diplomat. The galaxy watched a small creature facing down bears and wolves, and they understood. Size did not matter. Strength did not matter. Numbers did not matter. The only thing that mattered was the willingness to never stop fighting for what was right. That was the lesson of the Wolverine. That was humanity's gift to the stars. And that was why, when the galaxy looked back at the species that had changed everything, they no longer saw primitive predators from a dangerous world. They saw protectors, defenders, the species that had reminded everyone what civilization truly meant.